For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:06 on CJAD 800. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL's Josh Miller. Good evening, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And this evening on the program, we're talking about garages, and we'll talk to the man behind Garage Outfitters.
Garage Outfitters, I think people can equate it with, it's the California closets for garages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, men who enjoy their garages and their man caves. You're definitely going to want to hear Andrew in a second from Garage Outfitters. That should be pretty interesting. We'll also talk later in the program about IT. Our specialist, Kevin Ammerman, will be on the program. But first...
And our twiddle notes this week in data loss, because, you know, there's always some theft. So the twiddle note should be interesting this week.
Yep, for sure. Always hacks in the news. But first, some of the entrepreneurial stories making the rounds today. And we always talk about businesses having to adapt, and some of them, you know, are victims of fashion trends or things like that. And the fur business is one of those. How, you know, it is really politically incorrect these days to go around wearing fur. So you can imagine how that might pose some problems for people in the fur business. How are they adapting to changing times?
Well, I think, you know, Montreal was seen as the fur capital of North America at one point. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of furriers here in Montreal. Today, I think, you know, if you're down to a couple of dozen, it's a lot. And there's no question. I remember we had an entrepreneur on here a couple of years ago, Dan. It was Mariusz from Harry Canna, and what she did, or what they were doing, is it wasn't new, it was recycling. It was finding other uses. Well, that's a story that was in this week's paper, where there was a gentleman, and, you know, he's still a furrier. He's just shy of 60, and he's been in this business forever and a day, and finding where his current groove is. He knows that it's dying. He knows that it's tough. However, there is a trend. There are some companies and some celebrities that still wear fur and still promote it, not necessarily overtly all the time, so they don't get splashed with crazy blood or anything. But I think the story is what you do with today's market, what you do with a product that was phenomenal 30, 40 years ago. How do you make it relevant today? And I think the recycling aspect of it is huge. And I believe that most furriers find a way to recycle, whether they're taking a coat and cutting it up and making it into scarves, or they're making it into gloves, or they're taking the fur and having it as an accessory to a piece of clothing. I think that's where the entrepreneurs that are a little more avant-garde, the ones that want to reinvent themselves, they're finding better uses. But it's not easy.
This story reminds us of a company that we profiled actually on today's Entrepreneur a couple of years ago, Revels, a Montreal-based company, finding some success in China and some R&D success in China, really.
This is Revels. So this is earbuds, essentially earbuds molded to your ear. Everybody says an inner ear is kind of like a fingerprint. There's no two that are alike. And this company that had supposedly a pretty good technology was trying to raise funding, and they were doing okay, but they found their success by going to China. In this case, there was actually an incubator, a company just outside of Hong Kong in Shenzhen, who was looking for these type of startup companies, these technology companies, and this Canadian company said, you know what? Let's reach out. Let's apply to this. You know, Dan, we've always said apply to different, to win different contests or different programs. You never know what's going to come about. This company applied to this China incubator even after the deadline, and they were accepted. This Chinese incubator loved their product, thought it was very innovative, thought it was today's, believed in that inner ear fingerprint, whatever you want to call it. And they gave them, not only they give them money, but they flew them out to China, to Hong Kong, set them up for a few months, help them with their resources. Absolutely tremendous. I think the lesson here is there's far more beyond your own backyard. Yes, you can go to the Montreal community, the venture capital community, the private equity community, the angel investor community, but that's just Montreal. There's so much more beyond that. And certainly when you're talking about technology and you're talking about making sure the logistics and all the labor is correct, and there's no doubt that there's far more places well beyond Montreal.
When I read about the Revel story, I was surprised that two Canadians would have access to that kind of R&D resource in another country.
I think there's no question about it. The owners, the Chinese owners of this incubator, certainly looking to capitalize on other people's technology. And if they can do that beyond their own borders, they have the capital, they have the resources to do it. They might not have the innovation always. If they can buy that innovation and buy it fairly cheaply, then who wouldn't want to run with it?
Interesting piece in a report on business from a few days ago. Crowdfunding can be a minefield for young companies, especially, as the report says, if maybe you open a bit too big or raise a bit too much money. And, that could set a tone for later on that might be hard to match.
I think you hear a lot of great Kickstarter stories or Indiegogo or whatever this crowdfunding type is. And what you don't always hear is, do these products always make it to market? Do they actually come to fruition? Do the people that have kicked in money actually get their free product or their whatever it might be? You never know. The lesson or the story that's in this article is about knowing when to go to that crowdfunding market. If you go too soon, but your logistics aren't properly, or you have a great prototype, but you haven't figured out how to mass produce it, you really could fall flat on your face. So what could turn out to be a great Kickstarter type story, a great crowdfunding type story, might just fall flat if you can't meet the desires, the demands, the expectations of the people that have funded you. And it's one thing to make a prototype. It's another thing to go mass produce it, and to mass produce it 15,000 miles away. There's no question there are certain challenges, and then there's the logistics, of course. If you can get that set up to begin with, or a little bit more realistic to begin with, then you make your crowdfunding opportunity so much more appealing to the world. And I think some people go to crowdfunding a little bit too early, and then the danger is falling flat on your face when you can't deliver.
This story also from Report on Business. Obviously, we had a pretty warm winter, and that poses some problems for those that are in seasonal businesses. If you're relying on the cold, or maybe on the other side, the heat, what should entrepreneurs keep in mind if they are so heavily reliant on the weather and stuff out of their control?
I think the question is, how quickly can you react? How nimble is your business? How much can you turn on a dime? And how much can you think ahead? There's a lot of entrepreneurs that are a little stuck in their ways, but there's many, and we've spoken to a lot on the show, Dan, that really do have some vision and some future, and do keep their finger on the pulse of what's coming. And if you see that it's a warm winter, and you can certainly look ahead, whether it's a farmer's almanac for whatever you believe in, but if you can plan ahead and say, hey, you know what, it might not work out this winter, or do I adjust so that I have, different MOQs, minimum order quantities? Do I adjust so that I have a little more basic so I know that I can keep it for next season? Do I adjust so that I maybe alter my merchandising because it's going to be a little bit thinner coats are needed instead of heavier coats, and particularly in warm weather? I think it's the entrepreneur that really has to keep their eyes open constantly. You sit down and you rest on your laurels for just a moment, and you can be totally dead in the water.
And finally, as of around now, actually, the U.S. duty-free limit for web purchases is now 40 times higher than Canada's.
So the duty-free limit for Canada, if you want to buy from the U.S., is $20. If you want to buy something online from the U.S. and bring it over, it's great. It's $20. It used to be, if the U.S. was buying from Canada, it used to be they had a $200 limit before duty was applied. Now it's an $800 limit. So there's good and bad to this, of course. Naturally, from an e-tailer, if you will, it's great because the dollar works in their favor. You Americans are buying, send it out. They don't have to pay as much duty. They can be cheaper. I think that's fantastic. From the other side, from the retailers that are say, hey, that means that Americans don't have to actually physically shop more here. They don't have to come across the border. There could be a lot more competition for certain areas. So you have competing factors. Overall, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's ultimately where we're heading to some degree, that there has to be some stimulus, for the economy. And I think that's it's a good thing in the end.
We'll talk about the garage of your dreams with Garage Outfitters in a moment. Andrew from that organization coming up on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you on today's Entrepreneur. And this evening, our profile is Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters. Andrew, welcome to CJD.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
So tell me about Garage Outfitters. This seems like a pretty cool operation. You get to make male dreams come true.
As much as I do, yeah.
Sometimes female too.
Yeah, I would say that.
But it's a PG rated show, Dan, so we can't talk about that.
I would say actually a good 75% of my initial meetings with clients are women based. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of back and forth between both. But no, the whole company is the main idea of it is I'm the California closets of the garage, and I started it over 11 years ago with a hope and a dream, and I've built myself a little company, and I've been able to support a few families, and really be the called the marriage counselor of the garage, the family. So
now, when you say California closets, I mean pretty much a lot of people have an idea that you're really creating a space that's super organized.
That's right.
But is it from beginning to end? I mean, is it floor? Is it cabinetry? Is it electrical? Like kind of describe to us what you touch from a Garage Outfitter standpoint.
We specialize in finishing. So where I do help out with is from the initial, hey, I've got a completely empty room, or it's completely full and I've got to help out with the creatives, to, hey, I've got to add new lighting, heating, insulation, to busting out the floors, concrete floors that is, and redoing it from scratch. So I'm literally your, if you want to call it your, generic one-stop shop for the garage, but I do everything. And a lot of times we work with a core group of guys that give us the help to really fulfill people's dreams at as much as we can and as speedy as possible, so that there isn't any kind of drag on. So
now, what were you doing before this? Did you have a background in any construction or anything like that?
Absolutely not. I was working at a advertising firm out in Montreal and just got out of Herzing Institute. And once again, like, hey, I'm a marketing degree guy, and whatever that meant. And I figured out sales was something I really enjoyed doing. I also enjoyed working with my hands. And as my guys know, I'm not the fastest at it, but I do have a passion of helping people. And I tried to put all my things that I enjoyed doing in life and tried to group them together. And I had aspirations of designing. I've had aspirations of being a contractor, a fireman, and I enjoyed doing sales and kind of meeting people and being my own boss. And I managed to put all those things together. Yeah, I'm a firefighter all day long because I got to put out fires for making people happy, and short bursts of, hey, I got to do this, fix that right then and there. And I do a lot of so much design to 3D renderings to taking phone calls and all of it. So yeah,
did you have to fall flat on your face in the marketing job to get this started?
Absolutely, yeah. I as a few of my employers back then knew, because there was a few guys that owned the company, I wasn't a success. I basically flopped hard. And thankfully, I was able to create myself a buffer prior to starting that company. Prior to starting Garage Outfitters, I had a few months reserve where I was able to really just take, the amount of money that I had to sit back and kind of review what I wanted to do in life. And I was very fortunate to have good friends around me that had already started a few companies and really were able to just feed off their ideas, and they're just like, start something, and looking at their success, I was very fortunate to have them as mentors, So
from marketing to Garage Outfitters, kind of where that came from, very interesting. When we come back from the break, we'll figure out why Garage Outfitters stood out to you.
Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters, our profile this evening on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:25 on today's Entrepreneur. Our guest this evening is Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters. So you started out as a marketer. Andrew, what made you want to sort of do something more with your hands?
I enjoyed creating things, and I really had a passion for just putting things together. As a kid, I was always it was funny, looking back, and I was like 12, 13 years old. I was always playing in my father's garage, outlining things where the tools are supposed to go. And I I kind of put everything back together, and I looked at it like, what's going to make me happy? And yeah, if I can do all the things that I really enjoy doing and wanted to do in the future, and I managed to get it all done. And yeah, the days are long. God knows how many people have waited for me for suppers, but
So Garage Outfitters, was that something you created? Did you find it elsewhere? Like, where did that idea come from?
Working for the marketing firm, I had a few conversations with people that I was able to, promote the idea of marketing to, and one of them was a company that had a garage, was doing garage services, and I was like, that's pretty awesome, you know what I mean? And I met a few people after my kind of departing from the marketing company that had established businesses, and they were doing very, very well for themselves in the States. And I was like, hey, no one's really doing it in Montreal. And the closets were the real big kick back then. 10 years I look back, if everyone was talking closets, you were doing really well for yourselves. Garages was still garages. Are you crazy? You're gonna put money in your garage? And I guess it was only for, the more astute financial people that were able to do this kind of thing. But, we've made it so cost effective and easy to manage right now that anybody can do it. So
It's true. I would think that if you're going to be spending, if you have disposable income, garage might not be the first thing you spend your money on. Yet it's an important aspect of the house, and it certainly areas, and there's people that have the money to spend it. So when you're starting out Garage Outfitters, and it's brand new and it's just yourself, but you need some capital to go in. I mean, you said you had a bit of a reserve,
Yep.
But how was your financing? Did you go to banks? Like, what was your experience there?
Starting off, the banks weren't as helpful because, they said you have to have money to borrow money. And I was like, what? I got nothing to start a real company on. I've turned to the family and friends, and I was denied from a few of them as well from the few banks. But I was fortunate enough to given a good lump sum of money from my grandfather, and that kind of gave me the boost to really give me the confidence, And he said,
Was he tough with the money? He said,
Oh, yeah.
I'm giving it to you, but if you don't get it back to me.
Yeah, he put me on a timeline, and he basically said, hand over the car keys, hand over this, and sign everything off. And I was like, okay, you know what, I've got to hand it off. And at the point where I was able to really start paying him back, and it took me a little while, but he gave me the time to really just figure out life, and I paid him all back and then some, as much as I can. And he's still a very part of my life, and as much as everyone else is, my whole family, they really do support me.
So over the years, certainly the beginning, and certainly more now that your projects are quite numerous, cash flow has got to be something that you manage to learn over time, and I guess always keep your head above water. Was it difficult to learn? Is that something that
it still is an ongoing experience? As a definition of an entrepreneur for me is someone who can pay for his mistakes and keep on going. And yeah, I've paid, and fortunately enough, I have a few good supporters in financial institutions that do trust me. I've had one where a account manager basically said, she basically signed off on a amount of money that I was really able to really start opening up the doors of owning a container from China and bringing it in and giving me that kind of cash flow again.
How many years into your business were you able to get to have that done?
It was probably year 3. Being cutting any kind of ties from reality of, hey, I can make other money elsewhere, and I just really focused on it.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:36 on today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening is Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters. Pretty cool business that you started, Andrew. You basically soup up people's garages, and sounds like a lot of fun. Can you tell me about a couple of the projects that are the most memorable to you, the craziest garages you've designed?
There was one we did out in Outremont for a guy that basically built his house around his garage. He had dug out as much as possible out of the ground and made himself various layers to park each car, and he had managed to put in a Lazy Susan because there was enough space, but he wanted to have that cool feature where his car was spinning, so at least he can watch it all the time. And that was pretty
It's
cool.
like the old Batman. You drove in first, it spun around, so you can actually drive out, so you don't have to back out. Very cool. So, which of course, and right at the beginning of the program, you were saying how you flopped at the advertising, but marketing has got to play a huge role. I mean, you're starting out your business, and these cool places, I mean, word of mouth, there's no question that your work will speak for itself. But what did you do? Like, what kind of worked for you at the beginning or versus what's working for you now?
Well, looking at the whole idea of my business, it's a very luxury-based business. So I had to look at companies that were successful in not necessarily my field, but where they're selling luxury goods, and a lot of the marketing ideas came from trial and tribute, and being very astute with my money as much as possible, and trying to choose the right advertising medium. And I've been very fortunate to choose a lot of the right mediums that have given me the success I have today. A lot of the things now, when I first started, weren't available. The online presence now, if you don't have a good online website, to really showcase your goods and have that image installed in the client that you are a professional enterprise, you have to get image across right away, and then from there, it's a really big factor in your business right now.
Do testimonials work for you, do you find?
Absolutely. I think that, basic, word of mouth, and having that kind of, on your website, if you go on Facebook and stuff like that, you'll be able to get a lot of good testimonies, and that does help, and you'll be able to get that kind of, hey, I've worked in your area, and a lot of the helps. So,
is there anything that didn't work over time?
Well, yeah. Lot.
Pick one or two. Let other people learn from your mistakes.
What I've done is, try to associate myself with the ultra high-end magazines, and putting myself in these high-end designer books that are costing an absorbent amount of money to be in a book, and you're being lost, and your message doesn't come across properly. What I've always done is try to stick to the rule of 3. If you try 3 times, then hopefully it'll work. And it hasn't always worked. You put hundreds and thousands of dollars into marketing, and you pray that it works. But once again, if you meet a right client that understands your vision of what you're trying to offer them, and the word of mouth does get around, and you build yourself off that, and you keep on going with the marketing. You don't realize everything that happens, but you do realize that money has to be injected into advertising on a daily basis, and if you don't, you're kind of falling at the wayside. So
now you came from a trade show today to do the show.
Absolutely, yeah.
What is your opinion of trade shows?
Oh, trade shows are,
for your business at least.
My business, because I'm a very visual business, people have to see what I'm offering them. You can't just be told over a phone, hey, you got to buy this item because it's going to change your life. They really have to touch and feel your product. And having my showroom and having a mock-up showroom of what I do in trade shows really gets people to understand the quality. You know what I mean? I've always based myself, I'm not a Costco, I'm not a Reno Depot, I am not associating with those companies, but I offer a product that has a lot of quality to it. And, associating myself with, like, if you would, the California closets of companies, you're buying a luxury good, but you also want to be treated as much, you know what I mean? And with making sure that you get that quality and that customer service behind it. And that's where a lot of success comes from.
So trade shows are good in your opinion? Exhausting maybe.
Exhausting, absolutely. It burns you out, but I think it's definitely a positive in any business to be part of them. And, as much as they do hurt to spend the money on for X amount of time, it is definitely something that you will see value over a period of time.
So if you're dealing with a luxury item and everything is pretty much custom, how do you find your pricing? And your pricing today, like versus when you first started out and not knowing it, how did you work out, and what was your strategy of finding your right price category?
I started off with being a customer and calling a lot of U.S. companies and just picking their brains. And I wouldn't say that I did the false interviews of having people over my own parents' house, but a lot of it was based on just doing research, market research, finding out what guys that are successful doing. And it's been a lot of cold calls out to the States and saying, hey, I see you have a successful business, what works, and trying to speak to the owner. And my previous marketing background, I was always trying to chase the owner, so I had a little bit of experience on how to chase the person down with the right right answers that I would ask questions for, and it turned out really positive. So that was my beginning of it, and now, it's just experience in what market is accepting. You have to change your pricing. There's so many avenues out there, but it's a question of just keep advertising and focusing on your client and trying to make them happy. So.
Speaking of making clients happy, you must deal with a lot of couples who might have competing visions of what their garage should look like. How do you settle that, especially when you're trying to push one side of the couple for a more expensive option?
That's a delicate question, Dan.
Yeah.
I'd like to see you answer that question.
I'm not mentioning any genders here. I'm just saying.
Well, there's, what I find that in any good marriage, there's a lot of compromising, and you have to be respectful for both parties, And as I said, I do meet a lot of women that have an envisionment for their home, and yes, it is a couple decision, and I have to be respectful for both points. We do create a lot of custom walk-in type solutions for garages, and at the end of the day, yes, we try to appeal to both sexes, so there isn't really one design that wins over the other. But when I do my presentations, I'm on both sides, you know what I mean? And I can't be, hey, I've got this great idea that's going to work for you, but not for you, And most of the time, for whatever reason, a lot of matriarchs in the home will tend to give the garage up as their kind of, you can have it, honey, and make it yours. It's not always the case, but a lot of times it tends to be that. And most of the time it's, hey, okay, put stainless steel here, do some red cabinets there, do the floor this way, and they're just like, carte blanche, honey, you've given me the house, you know what I mean? So
you're talking about the different type of materials. I would imagine, you've been doing this 10, 11 years. Technology and the types of materials that you can use and you do use, has that changed drastically? If you have to kind of update it, certainly the design aspect, I'm sure, has helped greatly. What about on the material side?
We've reduced a lot of our overseas purchases because it was bogging us down with huge inventories and demanding cash flow outputs. And we've managed to keep ourselves really, really up to date with just constantly doing R&D and searching, and we've managed to keep ourselves above, if you would, the big box chain quality, but being very competitive in a price point as well. And it is a question of constantly doing research. I've had countless arguments with suppliers and just trying to adapt a product to make it the way I feel would be the best for a client and well received. And a lot of it's worked and a lot of it hasn't, but you try to adapt and you adapt and you adapt and you constantly just look for the next best thing, but you kind of want to make a client happy with what you're giving them, and you have to constantly put that effort into it. And if you're not revamping yourself on a 6 months period, you're the old dinosaur, So. And
certainly with a number of technology changes in any business, yours too, with the type of materials and the software, it's you really got to stay on top of it to give that best product. You're giving a luxury product, so you got to stay on top of it. Technology is huge, and speaking of technology, Dan, that's where we're heading to next.
Yes, Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist at Fuller Landau, will join us next. We'll also talk about Twiddle, This Week in Data Loss, and Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters will offer up his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, chartered professional accountants and business advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:49 on today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL's Josh Miller with you. We'll have Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters, one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur on the way. But first, we welcome back Kevin Ammerman, IT consultant at Fuller Landau. Welcome back, Kevin.
Thank you.
And so, Josh, we'll start with IT issues and data loss.
Twiddle, This Week in Data Loss. We could probably do this almost every week. It's kind of scary what kind of information gets stolen, but Kev, what's the latest in our Twiddle notes?
It goes on and on. There's one of the big ones is the IRS. This is sort of the ghost of last year's IRS breach. So last year, hackers managed to sort of exploit the system and submit people's tax returns on their behalf and collect the checks and then disappear before the actual taxpayers had the chance to do it themselves. And the IRS stepped in and they took some, they made some moves to try and protect these people. set them up with credit monitoring and things like this. But unfortunately, the service that they set them up with was compromised. And the hackers managed to attack the same people again this year, just by guessing some common security questions.
The exact same people.
The exact same people. The hackers knew that these people had been provided with this credit monitoring service. And in order to log into that service, people had to provide answers to 4, unfortunately, way too simple questions. So things like former addresses or amounts of loans, such as student loans and things like this. And this was easily guessed by people just going onto Facebook and looking around a little bit.
How much? I mean, there's a lot of information that we provide online. Again, like you say, whether it's social media or other. How easy is it for somebody to get? We're talking about open, available, public information, not private stuff, not stuff you keep on your desktop at home, or is that what people are looking at?
The stuff that gets compromised the most often is relatively public information. So in this case, it's government information. Some of the other stuff that gets stolen all too frequently is credit card information or transaction databases from online services. But the problem is hackers can, compile that information and cross-reference it. So they'll get data from, say, the IRS hack, and then some more data from maybe Ashley Madison, and all of a sudden they've got a pretty thorough profile of a victim.
Because, Ashley Madison people pay taxes, so hey.
Well, you start cross-referencing credit card numbers, things like this, and all of a sudden you have the real identities of those Ashley Madison people, right? So
what other IRS? That's a big one, of course. So the Ghost of Christmas Past. But any others that hit your list?
Another tax-related one was a pretty big technology company, Seagate, was hit with a phishing attack. So hackers sent emails to sensitive employees, key employees at the company, requesting American W-2 data, which is, that's quite a lot of information. It's all the social insurance numbers, income, addresses, the works. And apparently they were quite convincing because one of the employees at Seagate sent information on all current and past employees. And Seagate's, I don't know how many thousands of people they employ, but it's quite a few. They sent the whole kit and caboodle, everything, to the hackers. So that's out there. It's now for sale on the internet. And again, these people can just buy that information from these darknet brokerages and compile information.
Or, of course, there's the ransomware, the people that hold information for ransom and then kind of want you to pay them to get it back.
Yeah, that's a whole nother target. So that's a little bit more through spyware and these scams where companies claiming to be Microsoft call you on the telephone and try to get remote access to your computer. And then, of course, encrypt all your files and demand money in order to get it back.
So naturally, the entrepreneurs that have all this data, they have to try to find a way to protect their customers. So when we come back from the break, maybe there'll be one or two things that the entrepreneurs can think of smartly to protect this data from hackers like this.
Plus, Andrew Wojtczak's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur that's on the way.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
And we'll have Andrew Wojtczak's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur. He's from Garage Outfitters, so that's on the way. But first, Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist with Fuller Landau, talking about this week in data loss and other IT issues.
And we were talking about, all this data loss, all these entrepreneurs that hold a lot of important data of their customers. What are some of the things, Kev, that entrepreneurs can do to protect this data so that it doesn't get lost or, kind of taken by hackers?
It's a huge range of information. So it's not only the clients, but your employees and your suppliers as well. So just be aware of what you're asking, the information that you're asking your clients to provide you, and be careful who you're dealing with. So even like credit card providers and other online services, be wary of what you're giving them on behalf of your clients, and be aware that you might be responsible for that. So check with your insurance people too.
Does it make a difference if entrepreneurs hold their customers' information in the cloud versus on their own server?
Probably not too much. We get a lot of questions about that, mostly in terms of jurisdiction. So if it's stored in the States versus Canada. But honestly, there haven't been a lot of lawsuits go down yet that really answer that question very nicely.
Because you can find ways to protect your data regardless where it's stored.
Exactly. So by encrypting it properly and, safeguarding it the right way, you get around those problems to a degree.
And certainly backing up information, testing your backups to make sure it's the correct information, updated information. I guess there's a almost a whole policy manual that you could create or follow.
That doing good backups will really help you in the events of those ransomware kind of schemes.
Would you say it's almost required to have that disaster recovery plan, or part of your disaster plan is what happens if?
100%. You got to have scenarios. You got to run through not only what happens if your laptop gets stolen, or if your building catches fire, or if your client's building catches fire. You've got to take all those things into account and think of ways to deal with it.
It's there's no question there's a ton of things to think of, and it's as technology gets even faster and stronger, who knows what's coming next. Thanks very much, Kevin. Lots of things to think about and to deal with. And as we come up to the last moment of the show, as we do every week, we'll look at Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters and ask you, Andrew, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I think know your limits, make sure that you understand what you can deliver, and trying to set realistic expectations on your staff, making sure that you can fulfill on your word. And every entrepreneur has the goal of serving as many people, and the hope one day that everything is going to become amazing financially. But you know what? Take your time, figure it out. There's no secret to success. It's hard work and perseverance, and the rest will come in. You know, I was always told 5-star service, 5-star product, and money will be a byproduct. And if you follow those key little details, you're set for life, you know. And just make sure you surround yourself with a great family and friends, and cherish them, because at the end of the day, you have to make money, and that's part of it. But take your time and just really focus on your family and make sure that you're happy. So.
Great many words of advice. Dan, my quick takeaway is, you know, so many entrepreneurs are great at what they know. They don't always deal so well with what they don't know. What Andrew is saying is perfectly true. Know your limits, know what you can't do, and deal with it accordingly. Don't pretend to be all things to all people.
Thanks, Andrew Wojtczak of Garage Outfitters, for stopping by the program this evening, and to Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist at Fuller Landau. We're back in next week, actually, next Monday night at 7 here for today's Entrepreneur. The Exchange with Dan Spector is next. Have a good night.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.